Mhm.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so the plan for today just was really for us to at least just start out by introducing ourselves. And yeah, I mean, I since it's just the both of us, it could be more of a dialogue. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, if that sounds good with you.
Sure. So my name is Maria. I joined because I was interested in sort of like reflecting on the word and the world, and I connected with Liberation Schools through a friend of mine who passed the information, and I've always been interested in liberatory education, and I wasn't like really sure what it means in practice, and so hence why I'm here and just trying to learn more about how to actually put it into practice. I work with I went to school for teaching, elementary school.
Okay.
um, I speak Spanish. That's my first language. And right now I'm working for a nonprofit around food education and nutrition. But also there's a component to gardening for freedom. And so I kind of
Okay.
want to bring that in, into the garden space and garden education. So
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, my name is Jay, and I'm a administrator, work in higher ed primarily. And my background, though, is in adult education. So I come to critical pedagogy and Freire from that perspective.
Mhm.
And the reason I wanted to facilitate this class is because in my own work, I know I entered adult literacy and adult education because I really love to read, and I really wanted to share that with other people. And in the context of talking with a lot, mostly women of color who I work with, I mean, their experiences with school were traumatizing. I mean, it was just they many of them had undiagnosed learning disabilities, so they struggled kind of silently, or they were
Mhm.
just pushed through school and didn't really know what they were doing, or they were school was just like this horrible place. And while I definitely have my own challenges, especially I think in higher ed, school was like a haven for me, and so I realized that I wanted to try to kind of create this or help them create almost a corrective emotional experience so that school became an education, became something that was transformative, that was not like a place where they felt judged, but where they felt they could be themselves and find themselves in it. And I
Mhm.
know that, as we address all the challenges that are happening now as educators, as parents, as caretakers, like all those things, our own experiences with school shape how we're
Mhm.
looking at what's happening with young people and adults as well. And so I wanted to find a way, not it to become like therapy, but to process and think of at a theoretical level, but also at a personal level. So
Yeah.
that was my goal.
Yeah. I was at a meeting yesterday, and it was a principal was actually leading the meeting, and he was talking about um just being an educator, like what that means, what it meant for him. And he had us share our experiences, and I said that um me as a student that was labeled as English language learner, like English as a second language,
Hmm.
I almost felt like the stigma around that, where like I was like deficient in some way.
Okay.
And to this day I feel like, you know I didn't understand very well the education system when I arrived, and my parents couldn't help me. So I wasn't like channeled to the right channels, right? I was just like,
Right.
oh, this person, is not ready, whatever. So, she can take this algebra or whatever. So
Right.
I was like, I graduated and I couldn't even go to a 4 year college. So I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it just
Right.
like you internalize that kind of stuff, right? Like you feel like down or like less off. And so I said that I had gone into education because I wanted, especially kids who are, children of immigrants, bilingual in most cases, to feel confident and to like, feel that they can do things, and that it's a gift to know more than one language.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so yeah, so he said, as an educator, you want your kids to have, even as your, yeah, when your experience was negative, you want your students to have positive experiences from education. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, there's so much. I mean, I'm working primarily with adult learners in higher ed, but the shift to online has been really challenging. And then most of my students are parents themselves, and so their
Mhm.
kids have also had to be make that shift as well. And so I know
Mm.
that dealing with those dual challenges has really it has really had an impact. And some of them have had to have dropped out because
Mhm.
it's too much. And so we're just hoping that at some point they do feel able to come back. But it's a lot to put on someone right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, I don't have any kids, so I feel like in some ways
Yeah,
I'm
neither do I.
fortunate in that
Yeah.
way.
But yeah, I can, my students tell me about, and sometimes when during the Zoom meetings, it's like the kids are, mom, it's a lot.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So what were you able to look at the Frere? I know you're familiar with Frere as well, but what is kind of your thoughts about it?
So I actually, I mean, I didn't get to read it the whole thing, but I was just looking at, the very first paragraph where, this is an interview and they're asking him what it means for him to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And um, he said, he said that a teacher is a person who's constantly developing and developing certain qualities and virtues. And I was like, right, because
Yeah.
when I was going to school, I mean, for teaching, I felt like there wasn't so much that sort of, bringing your virtues as an educator. It was a lot about like, teaching math and ELA and like, running records and this and that. And it was just like, like you were like sort of robotic, and like
Mm-hmm.
Freire was just, I mean, you were lucky if you read Freire, right? Because,
Yeah.
not all teaching programs will bring that to the forefront, right? And so I feel like there wasn't a lot of that. I don't know, like bringing sort of these virtues and qualities into the, I mean, as part of the program. But then if you want to be an educator, like that's part of your own personal journey, but I wish it was also sort of like a more established thing where, you're being mentored to be an educator as well, because it's, yeah, because it's hard, it's hard, and you do want to be a good educator. Like you don't want to mislead people, or just be mediocre. And I guess that's what my biggest fear was, that I wouldn't be good enough, right? But also like maybe that has something to do with just my insecurities, I guess.
But yeah, I mean, it's like I think there's a lot of pressure on educators. I mean, to be good and certified, and there's all these expectations. And if
Mhm.
obviously, and I mean, I think if the students for whatever reason have challenges, it's often the teacher's fault. The idea is that the teacher isn't doing something right. And so
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah, I can imagine feeling like I've got to be able to you know educate these kids so they can pass this test, that we
yeah,
know that I'm doing my job.
right, because everything's also, they're keeping track of all of these numbers, and they're promoting you on like how you're accomplishing, like how you are, measuring the progress, right, of children.
Mhm.
And it's like, if you can't make those numbers, also it means that you must be a bad teacher, it's like it's
Yeah.
like, damn, it's hardcore. So I mean, that's one of the reasons why I also didn't want to stay in the public school system in a way, because like I realized that like I couldn't handle that pressure in a way. Um but I wanted to be connected somehow, right? And so I like being outdoors. Like I'm a person who likes nature and like the benefits of nature. And I said like, and there's so much knowledge already that people sort of bring within themselves about nature, the natural world, or like immigrant communities that have been working on the land, you know. So, but that also has a very heavy sort of traumatic experience with it. So it's like, I don't want to go back to farming. What do you mean? Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be a farmer. Like, my parents were farmers and they were poor. So it's like, you know, it's
Yeah.
that whole thing where, well, it's problematic, I guess, in a way. But
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to like find the words to talk, you know, more about it, like why it's important in terms of liberatory practices.
And you're talking about like working, like gardening and working with the land as something that provide, like, I mean, and you're talking more in terms of just people being connected to the land, or tell me some more about that when you
Mm.
say liberatory.
Yeah, I think both ways, like connected to the land, as in just connecting to our like natural rhythms of being on the earth, right? So we're like very, you know, we're like pushed to produce, and like, you know, your calendar has to be full of meetings, and if that's not you, then you're doing something wrong, you know. And it's like money, 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 make money. And so it's like, it's is that the kind of life that we're trying to live, right? Whereas before all of this, we had different rhythms and we were connected more to the natural world. We're like destroying the planet. So it's like there's a we need to realize what we're doing, right? And so part of connecting to nature is also realizing that our disconnect is bringing all of this doom to the earth, right? We're in some way contributing, although we can be also victims of it, because you know, we're not the corporations who are destroying the
Right.
earth in a way. um, so that's on one part, and then on the other side of that is, you know, my parents were, my dad like grew up working the land. Like he was a sharecropper in Ecuador. And so my grandpa, like the two generations, and I guess before him, like I don't even know who came before him, but you know, they took his land. They gave him land first, and they took his land. Then he had to like save money to finally buy land. And so that was all he had, you know. So but then my dad didn't want to stay there. Like he wanted to go to the city, you know. It's like, why would I want to stay, you know, and work the land? And now there's like so many people who are sort of returning to the land, you know. And like that's also part of reparations. Like, yeah, give the land back, you know. Like this was a stolen land, here in Latin America, like all over the Americas, right? And in other continents as well. So yeah, I think we need farmers. And it's fine if people who are now like millennials or whatever decide to go to the land, yeah, you know. But also, who's going back to the land? Like a lot of farmers who are like in the, you know, farming movement now, like is the predominantly white, you know, folks who are going back to the land because they have the resources, they're purchasing land. But it shouldn't be that way, you know. Like there should be a push for helping people of color to return to the land because it was rightly theirs, right? And they helped build this country. And so the natives, you know, the land was stolen from them. So it's like, yeah. And I feel like sometimes talking about this stuff with just, I guess, people who are not um, so much thinking about these things can be like dropping a bomb, right? It's like, wow, what are you saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like sometimes I'll say stuff and then I'm hearing myself talking and I'm like, oh my god, I sound like depressing. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's like it's not a, I guess it's not a happy topic on some level, but it's, you know, it's a tough um it's a tough story. I mean, it's the start, it's the beginning of this country. I mean, it starts with that in some ways. And then,
Mhm.
you know, the way that land was, you know, who ended up working the land and under what conditions. I mean, it's very, very tied into the history of this country, and I, which is something I think, at least what we've experienced more recently, people don't want to deal with it. I mean, they don't want to deal with that history. And so when you bring up things that, I mean, the response to the 1619 project is a response
Yeah.
to that, like the rage and,
Hmm.
it's because that's a history nobody really wants to confront, or a
Hmm.
lot of people don't want to confront. And so I think these are critical questions, and I think it's powerful to be able to access that, and
Hmm.
to understand how powerful that is.
Hmm.
To be able to work the land, to grow your own food, to know how things work, is
Yeah.
really. I mean, my sister is actually, she's a nutritionist, but she's also a farmer
Mm.
in Minnesota, of all places. So right now things are fallow, but I mean, during the summer, she sends me pictures of her food, and I'm just like, wow, and because she works for the CSA, and so
Yeah.
and then when she has extra stuff, she like just leaves it on my parents' doorstep, and people come and get it, and it's I mean, I would say it's not something she's kind of the one who's always dietitian and food, and kind of, we say that she's very like hippie type. But I can feel that, I can see how important that is, and what it
Mhm.
means to grow your own food and to eat that food. And it
Mhm.
really does make a difference.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So that's, I think I did a lot of talking just about that.
No, I mean, I mean, I think it is really connected to, Freire, the word in the world, and the fact that that context,
Mhm.
the way that we move in the world, the way we think about the world, it needs to be included in educational spaces. And
Mhm.
and what usually happens is like you said, it's very stripped, for teachers, it's like skills and what you need to know so students can get content and pass tests, and not really
Mhm.
talking about what does it mean to educate, um, students, and what does it mean to be educated myself.
Yeah. I think one thing that I remember a lot about Freire, with from that other book, something about praxis. I think it's,
Hmm.
when you're saying something, then do what you're saying that what you're saying that you're doing, because otherwise it makes no sense. Like, why are you saying this stuff if you're not living the word, right? You're not acting upon it. So, and yeah, and like, I guess so many examples of that, just I guess just one thing that comes to mind, just because this is all over the news with that, with what happened at the Capitol, uh, white supremacists, or just the church, right? Like the Christian church that inflicted so much pain on people. And it's like, you preach about loving, right? Or being like brothers and sisters, but then you go on do this. It's like, how that makes no sense. That's not loving your neighbor. It's like so I guess that's just one thing that comes to mind. But it's like, but then I also think about what where I'm like not doing what I say that I want to do, so then it's kind of like a reflection, like a deep reflection on how you're living your life, right? If you're saying that you want to do this, that you're like for social justice, what are you doing for social justice? Like, how are you living your life that reflects what you're saying that you want to do. So yeah, and I think not all of us are engaged in that process. It's also because we're trapped in just the rush of living, that we're not really thinking about what it means to live, by your word. So that's my struggle.
Yeah, I know. Living, I guess, yeah, living your truth in some ways, really. And I think, when people do that, I mean, in some ways there's a price to pay. And I think that's the question we always have to ask ourselves, is like, are we willing to pay that price? Because,
Mhm.
um I think so many, as you said, so many of us are not doing that. And so when someone does, when someone really takes a stand and lives that truth, it's not, people aren't like, hey, that's great. You know, I'm just thinking of the football player, um, Kaepernick or
Oh,
Kaepernick.
Kaepernick, yeah, he
Kaepernick.
took a knee. Yeah,
Yeah, you know, and just, I mean, kneeling,
yeah.
what happened and how this, you know, what the perception of it and what he lost in some ways. I mean, his career. And it
Mhm.
was, you know,
Right.
it was a simple act, really, nonviolent, you know, made sense, but it disrupted so much um, of what was in place. And now you have like the NFL making statements about diversity,
Mm.
you know, and um, you know, after George Floyd, it just, and it's, you know, it's, the hypocrisy is very clear, but it's just
Mhm.
when you take that stand, especially if you're the first one, it's not an easy road to go.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us, you know, and you know, no judgment, make, you know, make a different choice.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I think we're all are at different levels of, but ideally, you would want everyone to, to engage in this process, especially people who have the power to make decisions that affect us all. This is like,
right.
if you have like the people in power who are totally, it seems like they're so removed from the realities of the world. Is like, what, why are you sitting where you are? Like, you should not be there. Like,
Yeah,
so I think like that's what, it really upsets me, I guess, in a way where, the people who are like, in some ways, like middle to the bottom of sort of the strata, right, social
right.
strata, are doing this work, and like the ones at the top are like totally destroying everything and are not engaged in this kind of process at all. It's like they don't care at all. It's like, what? Crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah. But I do look forward to reading this whole piece, because I haven't read this interview, but I think it's more than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interview, but it's like he brings up a lot of his key um, his key ideas, I think, in this.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think one thing he talks about is, you know, the importance of teachers also being learners. I mean, in his book, I think it's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he talks about the banking method of
Mm-hmm.
education. You know, you're just like depositing information as this kind of you know, this authoritarian figure as a teacher, and he obviously pushes against that. And it's really important that teachers see themselves as learners, and that there's something that the student can bring to that as well. I mean, I think that's been, for me, one thing that's been very important in terms of adult education is to realize that I'm probably going to learn more from these students than they learn from me, because they know more, and in many ways. I mean, some of them have just more life experience, and I, you know, as an instructor, as a teacher, being able to accept that is really key. And I end up becoming a better teacher because I'm open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with the with children, the same thing happens where, they're just, also because they're like children, they're at a different level of processing things, and just by asking questions, they can take you in a different direction, and it's like, oh my god, I didn't think of that. That is great, so it's amazing when that happens. So
Yeah,
it opens other doors, so
yeah,
for both, right, for the teacher and the student. So
right, yeah.
where do you teach?
So I teach at Lehman College, which is a CUNY school,
Hmm.
and you know, and early on, mostly taught people who were adult learners who were getting their working to get their high school equivalency diploma or their GED. But now I mostly work with adults who are returning to school to get their bachelor's degree.
Mm,
So it's a it's a different population, but to be honest, a lot of the challenges are the same. I mean,
mhm,
in terms of just you know, it's interesting because for so many students, it's like they just want to get that credential,
mm,
that the
mhm,
diploma or the bachelor's degree. And yeah, I mean, it's going to make a difference for them. Like it opens doors.
mhm,
They will get probably a better paying job. But I know it's for me, it's always this, this kind of struggle because I also want students to really see the value of education and being able to just to look at the news, to read something and to be able
mhm.
to unpack it and
Yeah.
know what's happening. And I think sometimes students, because they're just trying to live their daily lives, like that doesn't seem as important. It's just like, what do I need to do to get the
Mhm.
grade so I can get through this class? And I'm I'm always focused on like trying to help them see the importance of that. Like, don't just go to the New York Post and it says this study says this. I'm like, this is how you find the actual study, and this is how this is how you begin to try to understand that study. Or
Mhm,
if you don't understand something, this is where you can find out how to figure it out.
mhm.
Because I think that's for a lot of students that's where I think that's where you have a lot of misinformation.
Mhm,
And we had a vaccine information um, webinar because we have a lot of students and even staff that are reluctant to take the vaccine and have a lot of they have questions about it, justified and
mhm.
confusion. And so part of that is really helping people, whatever decision you make, it's based on like your ability to understand and unpack information on your own. So you can look at one side and look at the other and then come
Mhm.
to whatever decision you come to. But it's not just because my aunt told me this or the daily news is writing,
Right.
telling people this or that. It's like
Yeah.
you're
They
able to
sent me
think
this
of that.
video from Spain. They're saying this and that. It's like, what?
Right. Yeah. And that's a it's difficult because there's so much information out there. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm not young either, but I can't imagine having to like write papers and do all that stuff, in this I mean, you just go to Google and I mean, you can buy a paper. I mean, that's what students do sometimes. You can just,
Mhm,
it's like it's really been interesting and helping them,
mhm,
see like we've been had conversations about plagiarism and how do you cite information and figure out how to cite it so that they can,
mhm,
be able to look at many different sources and also know how to cite those sources because there's so much you can just cut and paste from the
mhm.
internet now. It's you don't even have to go to the library anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still went to the library, so I'm like kind of like giving away my in some ways.
Oh,
Like I
I
still
am.
went to the library. It was hard to find. Like you had to find things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like little by little, we were introduced to the databases in the computer. Now you can just search all of the databases, but even that was a lot of work because depending on what you're looking for,
Right.
you get so many results, right? So you have to being able to narrow stuff down. But I think I wanted to like say something about what you were saying that you know where sometimes we can't learn to unpack information, um, and we're just so busy that we're going to school, but we're not really getting too much out of it. And I think in some ways that has to do with it definitely is a privilege to go to school and not have to worry about paying rent and
Yes.
going to work and all of that stuff, because when you have to do all of that, you can't like you can't really see what you're doing
Right.
deeply. So, and I think sometimes when I think about myself, I wish that I could go back to school, and I know that in a different circumstance, I guess my experience would be different. Like I would be able to get a lot more out of it, knowing what I know now, right? And I guess that's probably like a common experience for people, but like that's what I've come to. And at the same time, I mean, there's people who are in really dire circumstances, and they go to school and they just like, you know, like it
Yeah.
just turns their life around, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
like how many of those people are really, like one out of like 1,000 or
Yeah.
like a million? Is like,
Exactly.
so it's very, like education is supposed to lift us all up, right? But we're not, but because we're like in different situations, we can't get as much out of it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's yeah, and I think, I've had to, as an educator, had to kind of shift myself, because I think, I mean, I was lucky enough to, like, I just went to school full time. I When I see people go, I know I couldn't have done it. I mean, I look at this, I'm just like, I could. There's no way. I know the way that I study, and so
Mhm.
it's. I know it takes a lot, and I think for me, I've just become more aware of how privileged I was, and that I really, in class, I really try to be more, like in the past, I think I might have focused more on just giving content so that people
Mhm.
could know. And now I focus more on just being more like interactive and doing things so
Mhm.
that in the class, they're getting exposure to the ideas that are important and the
Yeah.
concepts that are important, so that even if they don't have time to do it any other time during the week, at least during class, they've been able
Mhm.
to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I think what I'm thinking right now is, when I did my undergrad, um, I took of course you take like so many classes, right, over that period of time. And when I think back to all of the classes that I took, I can only remember a few, right? And that's how also I know, because I was also like I was the student who was, going to school at night and then working during the day. So I was always kind of in a rush, right? And but I remember this class that I took with a teacher who was kind of young, and she was a black woman, and that was like my first time that I've had a black teacher, I think,
Mhm.
in my life, or like in that period of time. um it was like some social science, and she was the one who had us read The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. She also had us read another really good book. It escapes me right now, but she also talked about the industry of like hip hop, and how the female body is objectified and all that stuff. And like that was also the first time that I had seen it like articulated, because I had thought about it, I guess in my head, but now like there was literature about this, and like a school of thought and all of that. And I was like, so, and it just makes me think about how what you are doing in a school can connect to so many things that you see in your life, like in your daily life, right? And like things that might interest you. So that was something that I was like, oh, and I never forgot, like she even showed us a video. Like music videos and things like that,
Right.
where we could see that. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. But also like my anthropology class, I had a really cool teacher, and he said once, I always remember this. He said, you don't, why do you think that all of the firefighters are white or something like that? And I was like, oh my god, I hadn't thought about that. And then, like, talking about racism, and like the institutionalized racism, like how come there aren't any, like, people of color who are like fighting fires, like. And so that he was talking about how it was sort of monopolized by the Italians, and all
Mhm.
of this stuff, and like very racist in like recruiting. And I was like, wow, like I guess I had never thought about it, and so I feel like for a teacher is like, pointing things out, right? Oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I was like,
Yeah.
makes you wonder, right? So I kind of try to remember that when I'm teaching, where if I could just, kind of instill a sense of wonder, then my job is done. It's like, well, ask yourself these questions because I didn't know about this, and all of a sudden someone pointed it out to me too, and it made me think,
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah, those are, I mean, I think that's um, a really good point. It's like, the fact that I think that so much, especially, when I think of all the testing that goes on in the younger grades, I mean, so much of it's about just like what they call schooling, like making kids, be able to conform and pass whatever test needs to be done, and less about like education and questioning and
Mhm.
figuring out things, what it is that they might be interested in,
Mhm.
observing the world. I mean, I don't even think that kids do that. I mean, they don't even have recess, some of them,
Yeah.
outside. So it's just, and it's the whole thing with the pandemic. I mean, one thing, that has been highlighted is just how important it is for kids to be socially connected, and the struggles that, the DOE has had, trying to figure out how to do that, to bring kids
Mhm.
in or not, and also parents deciding, a lot of the Black and brown parents deciding to keep their kids home,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
for out of just concern, or because of other issues. And so, and I don't know if you heard that the chancellor is leaving.
Yeah, I heard that. And
Yeah,
I mean,
you know,
he
yeah,
was getting very emotional about, he's had a lot of,
yeah,
loved ones, so like he hasn't had a chance to grieve. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I also feel like, wow, that's like super hard that he's had to continue to do his job even though he's been losing so many family members, and
yeah,
haven't had the time to even like cry it out. It's just like, wow. I just, because I cry like often. I'm like, but
yeah,
like I can't believe that,
yeah,
he's got to. But yeah, I don't know what that's gonna mean for, right, for the system, right, to
yeah.
continue to do what it needs to, especially right now in this like important transition. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, I was in a call this morning. One of our schools, they usually have Family Fridays, and so they would have this in person when, we were in person, but now they're having this virtually. And whenever there's a Family Friday, there's usually like a showcase. So the students are there doing some kind of presentation, and those are usually the events that are the the best well attended by parents. That's when you see a lot of parents trickle into the school, right? Either in person or virtually. Because otherwise, because they have an event every Friday, all of the other events are like, 10 parents, 11, but, or only the ones that can actually make that meeting in the morning, right?
Right.
But the kids were there, and at the end, everyone's like, "Okay, guys, bye," and everyone's like, "Bye." Everyone's trying to like get their buy-in, almost as is like, "This is my chance to connect with anyone, even if just to say bye, bye, bye." And the bye are endless, right? Bye, everyone's bye, 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 bye. So the principal is just like, bye, bye, guys. It also makes me like, I was there and I was just like, like I wanted to cry because,
Yeah.
you can see, like you can
Yeah.
sense that, like I want to be with people, or I want to see my friends, so yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's been, I think, um the hardest part of a lot of this, for students, has been that lack of
mhm.
connection. You just see these boxes on the screen, and
Yeah,
yeah.
which is,
Is your school going to be in person in the fall? Are they?
Um, I don't know yet. I think they're trying to bring teachers in, but there's also that side where some teachers are, not they're still reluctant. They're like, I don't feel safe. I don't want to risk coming in 5 days a week. So I think they're in that trying to convince the teachers, trying to like, talk, have these conversations about reopening 5 days. Right now, they have a good number of teachers who are still, they have been coming into the school for,
Okay.
2, 3 days, right? But then, yeah, some others are fully remote. So I don't know yet at this point. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of, across the board, there's a lot of concern about, I mean, I know on our campus, I don't think we could bring everyone back safely just because of
Mhm.
social distancing. So
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to find a way to, I don't know, stagger classes.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of people ride the subway to get, including myself, to get there. And so there's concerns about that too. If people have to commute on the
Hmm.
subway from
Right.
far distances, I mean, um, yeah, I haven't ridden the subway in a while. I miss it actually, but I just feel like, I if I had a short trip maybe, but I being on the subway for a long time makes me a little nervous, even with the mask.
Yeah. And we're gonna have to wear those masks, they're saying now moving forward. Is like, even if you're vaccinated, even, it's in like the new strands, coming out and like being spread around. Is, I don't know. It's like, is this vaccine even good? Like, is it gonna, guard me against the new strands of the virus? I don't know. So it's like, there's so much up in the air that,
Yeah,
there's a justification for people to feel afraid,
yeah,
so
there is. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I guess just a quick note about, today's meeting in the morning. The kids were, uh, one of the teachers had the kids recite part of the, I have a dream speech,
Mm, okay.
which, the speech is great and everything, but there's always, so much more that you can teach about Black History Month, right? And so whenever like that comes out again, and like the teachers and the kids are just like repeating these words, I'm like, do they know what they're saying, and it kind of like makes me like, oh, if I'm gonna teach about the speech, like, I'm gonna go hardcore. It's gonna be a whole unit about, or like, I don't know, something more than just the words, right? Or like,
Right.
there was another teacher who had them think about what they want to be, when they grow up or something. And so, and then they would say like, my ancestors' wildest dreams. And I was like, yeah, that's great. I mean, I kind of like that idea better, because they, at least they probably thought about what it means to be this person. Like, if I'm an educator, if I'm a doctor, and at the same time I have a problem with, like, adults asking children what they want to be when they grow up. But
What do you have an it? What is your issue with it?
because I feel like, we're, since we're born, we're sort of already prone to be programmed. And so, depending on, we're hearing so many things, like gendered roles and all of that stuff. And like, even when they ask you, who do you want to be when you grow up, is like, you probably already had a lesson about community service, police, this and that. And so, like, you as a kid, you're just like absorbing that, but you don't really know what it means. It's like, don't ask kids that question. Like, just let them be kids. Like,
Right.
who wants to worry about what they want to do when they for a living? It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know. So like, I don't
How
ever
can you
ask
grow?
my kid,
Yeah.
my nephews that question. I have nephews, so I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna ask them that question. I'm just gonna like let them do whatever they want and support them, and that's it.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's my thing. Like, I don't want to like be part of like this programming thing, because like, yeah, I don't think it's fair to the kids.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because I think, yeah, I think we do that a lot, and it's a lot of it's, I think, because we don't really know what to do differently.
Mhm.
Like, because
Yeah.
it just seems like, well, what do you want to do when you? I mean, that's just like, that's a question we ask kids, and we want them to be ambitious and have dreams and goals, and but it's true. I mean, there's so much that can happen between
Hmm.
third grade and the rest of their life. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a there's a video of this comedian. He's in the Daily Show with Trevor Noah. It's this Asian comedian. I forget his name. I think his name is Randy or something like that. And he's on a YouTube video doing a skit about having immigrant parents and him being an Asian and his parents wanting him to be a doctor. But like he makes a whole joke about how his parents want him to be a doctor just because he can make a lot of money and like not like and like finally sort of like beat that race to not being like an immigrant down here. Like if you're a
Right,
doctor first generation, you just like shoot up.
right, right.
That was, but he's like, but they don't care whether I help people heal, they just want me to like make the money. So it was so funny, but like he just makes a
Yeah.
joke out of it, like he's
No,
like, I didn't want to be a doctor, I'm a comedian.
yeah, I know, and I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on. I mean, you can understand why parents, especially immigrant parents or parents of color, would want, you. I mean, as a kid, I was told to be like, you want to be a neurosurgeon,
Hmm.
and I mean, I really did. I don't think I ever really did. Well, I mean, it's like that wasn't my thing, but that's and that's a great thing to be, but it's like it's like because you don't want. I think my mom, when she told me when she was in school, was like, do you want to be a nurse or a teacher? As a black student in this black woman in the
Mhm.
'60s, these are the two careers. Like, make a choice. And she was like, I can't stand blood. I don't want to be around sick people. So a teacher, and and I think she had a good career, but I think
Mhm.
she never wanted her kids to have like just those limited choices. So it was like, you're going to be something completely different.
Yeah.
And I understand that, especially if you feel like your own dreams
Mhm.
you weren't allowed to be who you really wanted to be. You want something different for your kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have also, I think there are studies about that, or people who are in the social sciences have written about how sort of like what the progression is, when you're a child of immigrants, right? Or like the generation is like, okay, your generation, your parents came like 2 generations ago, they were nurses and teachers. Now the next generation can be like, so like you kind of like keep moving up, I guess, in
Yeah.
profession. And I was just like,
Yeah.
wow, like that was also like kind of mind blowing to me when I
Yeah.
read that. But I guess I hadn't thought about that. Also me also being like, I wasn't even born here. I came when I was 15, so I guess I don't know if I should consider myself a first generation. Maybe not. Maybe my nephews are first generation because they were born here. But yeah. So imagine people who are still like coming in as crossing the border, or like
Yeah.
you know, it's it just never ends. It's like
Yeah. And I mean, everyone comes, with these hopes and dreams, that,
mm,
what I mean, a lot of times the parents will do whatever they have to do so that those, their kids can, whatever that dream is, the American dream. I mean, we have a lot of first gen students at our school, and that's just, having a degree. And, I
mhm,
mean, the graduation, I mean, it's sad because we're not going to have like the commencement that we would
mhm.
normally have because there's families there, and it's really emotional. And you can see like, the little kids, posing with their degrees,
Yeah,
because they're like so excited. And it means it could totally change the trajectory of somebody's life. I mean, it's life
yeah,
changing.
for
So
sure.
it's not it's powerful that having
Mhm,
that credential and going through that process.
mhm,
Um, but at the same time, I know that so many of them feel like a lot of pressure, and
mhm,
there's a lot of weight on them to be the one to get that degree, and people are
mhm.
looking to them and
Yeah,
expecting a lot from them. Some of them,
right,
like once you have a degree, it's like you have a good job, you have money, right? You have all these things.
right.
Yeah, expect you to have. Yeah,
I guess that's where it gets easier for the next generation because they don't feel as burdened, and I guess if they're going to school, they can actually pick and choose and be like, and I'm gonna go to school and really delve into this and like go crazy with this because I'm not worried about this degree so much. I'm worried about the experience, it's like, and this is what I wanted to do. And yeah,
Yeah.
basically their mind has that space to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this has been great. I didn't.
Yeah. Nice conversation. Hopefully the next time we'll meet, we'll have a few more people. But I'm just
Yeah.
hoping, yeah, that we can, this can be a place where people can just talk about these things. And maybe, I don't know if you have, ideas for readings that you think
Mhm.
would be good for people. I'm like, I'll admit my bias is more, and maybe it's my age, but it's kind of the classic readings like Baldwin and Bell Hooks. But there might be other stuff out there, so I
Yeah.
definitely don't want to be the one to
Mhm.
dictate that. So if if you've read stuff or there's stuff you think people would find interesting,
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I'll
I
think
think it'd
about
be,
it, because I've also read, I haven't read a ton of bell hooks, but I have a friend of mine gave me this book about love. What is it called? Um, I don't know. I forget the title, but yeah, I thought that was also great.
yeah, yeah,
But of course, she has, like so many other
I
works.
know, yeah,
But I've actually never have read Baldwin, which I've been wanting to, and I'm like, oh my god, like I've been living under a rock if I haven't read Baldwin. So it's like I have to do that. I feel like it's like on
yeah,
my list.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
something comes
and
up, I'll share.
yeah, okay, and yeah. I mean, Audre Lorde is one of my favorites as well, and even Toni Morrison has done. I mean, Toni Morrison's like almost a talus woman for me. And so yeah, but those that's my kind of my own bias because I know that there's a lot of people doing um, really great stuff out there. That's I don't know if you are you familiar with Chris Emden?
No.
He does a lot with hip hop education. He's very
Mm.
like on point, and if you Google him, you will
Mhm.
see. I think he has several talks, maybe even like a TEDx. He was at South by Southwest.
What was his last name?
Emdin, Emden.
Okay.
He's a very
Okay.
dynamic speaker too. So
Mhm.
you're just like drawn in. Um, and so,
Yeah.
he's kind of one of the younger people, newer scholars out there doing a lot of kind of
Mm.
groundbreaking work about that
Mhm.
brings in, he kind of lets kids, I mean, and I think a lot of people he scares a lot of teachers because he lets kids take over the classroom in a way. He lets them
Mm.
do teaching and I think a lot of teachers get worried about that, like in these high school,
Right.
junior high. And he's a science educator, science and math
Um,
education,
yeah.
and he uses hip hop and kids own experiences to get them really into those
Uh-huh.
subjects and to excel in them, not just like enjoy them but to excel. And
Mhm.
so yeah.
Cool. Makes me think of so one name comes to mind. Her name is Bettina Love. Do you know the teacher?
Yeah,
Yeah. Also like
I think she's a part of the same group.
yeah, because you mentioned hip hop and I was like, I think that's
Yeah,
how I
okay,
found her, where
yeah,
I came across that and I was like, yeah, and then I read about like I saw one of her TED Talks or like an interview. Yeah, and she's,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. I've actually never read like any sort of a scholarly papers but I know that she's written books, so
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Jay.
Thank you. I'm glad you stuck around. And I think our next meeting is on the 26th of March.
Okay.
So, if anything, if you find anything, I think if you send it to Elizabeth, the woman who
Yeah.
emailed you, she will get it out to people.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah.
I didn't realize, but this piece came before our meeting, so like we
Okay.
can read
All
we
right.
can read it before
Yes.
time, right?
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you let if you just send it to her, she can get it out to like everybody. She has
Okay.
she has everybody's email addresses. So.
All right. Cool.
Yep.
All right, Jay.
All right. Thank
Well,
you so much.
yeah. Thank you. Have a good
All
night.
right. Have a
Bye
good
bye.
weekend. Bye.